I smiled the whole drive to work that morning. 4 years. 4 years of 7 a.m., emails, weekend revisions, sitting across from clients who tested my patience and my professionalism in the same breath. 4 years of turning, losing accounts into case studies the agency put on their website. I had earned this review. I had built this review. And I walked into that conference room so sure of myself that I didn't even notice my hands weren't shaking. My manager was already seated. So was HR. So was my trainee. I thought it was strange that she was there. But I sat down, smoothed my blazer, and waited. My manager cleared his throat. So, we've been reviewing the Calloway account performance over the last 2 quarters. He slid a printed report across the table. I recognized the format immediately. I had designed that format. The numbers are strong. Really strong. And we want to make sure the right leadership is in place going forward. I nodded. Absolutely. I completely agree. He looked at HR, then at my trainee. Not at me. We're going to be moving Lisa into the account lead position. I stopped breathing. She's been instrumental in the Q3 strategy pivot, he continued, shuffling papers like he was reading a grocery list. The client specifically requested continuity with her. I turned and looked at Lisa. She was staring at the table. Not at me. At the table. Because she couldn't look at me. She already knew. She had known before I walked in. I'm sorry, I said, and my voice was steadier than I expected. Can you explain what you mean by instrumental? Because I built the Q3 strategy. I wrote the brief. I ran every client call. My manager finally looked up. We're not here to relitigate credit. We're here to talk about the future structure of the team. HR slid a new document across the table. A role reassignment. My name at the top. New title, Senior Content Specialist. No client-facing responsibilities. No account ownership. A lateral move dressed up as a promotion with a 2% raise attached to it like a bow on a cardboard box. I picked up the paper. I read every line. Then I set it back down. I see, I said. I stood up, pushed my chair in quietly, and walked out of that conference room without signing a single thing. Back at my desk, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, copied 3 folders to an external drive I kept in my bag for exactly this kind of Tuesday, unplugged my keyboard, and pulled my succulent off the windowsill. It had survived a roof leak, a broken AC unit, and 2 toxic office retreats. I figured it deserved better than what came next. No one followed me out. No one said my name in the hallway. But here's what they didn't know. I had been documenting everything for 8 months. Not because I was paranoid. Because I had watched it happening in slow motion and couldn't prove a feeling, so I started proving facts instead. Every email where I wrote the strategy and Lisa forwarded it to the client under her own name. Every Google Doc where you could see my edits timestamped at midnight and her name added to the title the next morning. Every Slack message where she asked me to reword things so they sounded like her voice. I have receipts. I had a folder on my personal drive labeled simply Q3, and inside it was a paper trail that would make any employment attorney sit up straight. And I didn't sign that reassignment. I went home. I made coffee. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table and I started building. While my manager was congratulating himself on a smooth transition, and while Lisa was posting a vague LinkedIn update about exciting new challenges, I was pulling together 18 months of documented work history into the cleanest, most professionally damning portfolio presentation I had ever made. Version histories, email threads, call recordings from client check-ins I had led every single week. A side-by-side of the original campaign brief in my handwriting and the final deck that went to Calloway with Lisa's name on the title slide. I also pulled up the agency's client roster and started reading the footnotes, because the details are always in the footnotes. Calloway wasn't just an account. It was the agency's anchor client, a mid-size regional retailer that had been with them for 11 years, generating a retainer that covered roughly a third of the office's operating budget. The contract was up for renewal in 6 weeks. And the new account lead had been in the industry for 2 years, had never independently run a pitch, and had just been handed the keys to something she had never built. I knew the client. I had built that relationship personally. Their CMO, a woman named Diane, had sent me a birthday message last year and once told me in a meeting that I was the only person at the agency who actually understood their brand voice. I didn't call Diane. Not yet. I did something quieter first. I sent my manager an email. Subject line, documentation request before signing reassignment. I kept it professional, 3 short paragraphs. I explained that before I could sign any role change, I needed written confirmation of the attribution basis for the Q3 strategy credited to my colleague. I noted that I had version histories and email records showing primary authorship and would appreciate clarity on how the agency was handling intellectual contribution documentation. I ended it with, "I look forward to your response before the close of business Friday." He read it within 11 minutes. I could see the read receipt. He didn't respond. On Thursday morning, Lisa sent me a direct message. A long one. She said she hoped there were no hard feelings, that it was never personal, that she had always looked up to me and this wasn't how she imagined things going. She said she wanted to grab coffee and talk it through. I read it twice. Then I downloaded the entire Slack export of our conversation history, which included 14 separate instances of her asking me to ghostwrite client communications for her, 6 instances of me walking her through strategy frameworks she later presented as her own insights, and one particularly useful exchange where she explicitly asked me not to mention my involvement on a campaign recap because, in her words, it would be cleaner if it came from one voice. I didn't reply to her message. I forwarded the export to my personal email. Then I attached it, along with the version histories and email chains, to a message I had spent 3 days drafting. The recipient was Diane, the CMO at Calloway. I didn't lead with complaints. I didn't use emotional language. I introduced myself as the account strategist she had worked with for the past 3 years, reminded her of 2 specific campaign moments she had personally praised, and let her know that I was transitioning out of the agency and wanted to ensure continuity for her brand. I mentioned, briefly and factually, that I would be happy to share the full strategic documentation I had authored for the account should she want it for her own records. Then I attached a 10-page strategy brief for Q4 that I had written the previous week on my own time. It was the strongest work I had ever done. It anticipated exactly the market shift Callaway's category was about to face. I hit send at 9:14 on a Friday morning. By 11:30, Diane had replied. 2 lines. "I appreciate you reaching out. Can we speak Monday?" I said yes. That weekend, my manager left me a voicemail. His tone had changed. Something about a misunderstanding, a conversation worth having, making sure I felt supported. I listened to it once and saved it to the same folder as everything else. Monday's call with Diane lasted 47 minutes. She didn't waste time. She told me she had noticed the shift in communication quality over the past several months and had been meaning to address it with the agency. She had attributed it to the normal friction of a large account. She had not known I was being reassigned. She was not happy. And she had a question. Would you be open to handling this account independently? I told her I would need to think about it. I had already thought about it. I had already spoken to a contract attorney the previous Thursday, already registered an LLC on Saturday morning, already had a rate card drafted, a scope of work template ready, a professional liability policy quote in my inbox. I called Diane back Tuesday. I told her I was open to a direct engagement. She said good, and that she'd be in touch with their legal team. On Wednesday, the agency received a formal notice from Calloway. They were not renewing their retainer. They cited a desire to move to a boutique model with more senior-level attention. I know, because my former coworker, the one who sat 2 desks down and had watched the whole thing unfold in silence, texted me at 4:58 p.m. The Calloway thing just happened. The whole office is quiet. You okay? I was more than okay. I was sitting at my kitchen table signing my first independent client contract, a 6-month engagement with full creative authority, billing at nearly double my old salary rate. The week after that, I published a piece on LinkedIn. I kept my name on it. I didn't hide behind anonymity because I had nothing to hide. The title was straightforward: What 4 years of invisible work taught me about owning your own table. I didn't name the agency. I didn't name Lisa. I didn't need to. I described the pattern, the dynamic, the specific mechanics of how credit gets quietly redistributed when no one is watching, and how version histories are always watching even when people aren't. It got 600 shares in the first day. Then 3,000. Then it kept going. My DMs filled up with women and men who had their own Lisas, their own Tuesdays in conference rooms, their own signed-away contributions. A junior strategist in Denver. A copywriter in Atlanta who had been writing her Creative Directors Award submissions for 2 years. A project manager in Boston who had trained 4 people who had all been promoted over her. I wasn't just a name in an industry anymore. I was a reference point. Lisa's LinkedIn went quiet. No more updates, no more celebrating exciting new challenges. The Calloway account she had inherited was now a blank space on the agency's client page. I didn't post anything about that. I didn't need to. The absence said everything. My manager tried twice more. First through a mutual connection, who passed along the message that leadership was open to a conversation. I replied through that same connection, I appreciate the message. I'm fully committed to my current work. Then directly, an email to my personal address that I still don't know how he found, asking if I would consider a consulting arrangement with the agency on a project basis. I read it at dinner, put my phone face down, and kept eating. 3 months after I walked out of that conference room with my succulent, I got an email from a woman named Patricia Okafor. She was a partner at a mid-size but fast-growing independent agency with 3 offices. She had seen my LinkedIn article, had tracked down my work through the industry contacts I had built over 4 years, and had one question for her subject line. Are you taking on partners? I replied within the hour, tell me more. We met in person 2 weeks later. No assistants, no conference room theater. She came to the coffee shop I suggested, arrived 5 minutes early, had already read everything I had publicly posted, and brought a notebook she actually wrote in. When someone shows up like that, you notice. She walked me through what she was building. She didn't have a gap to fill. She had a vision that needed an architect. A new division focused on mid-market retail brands, the exact space I had spent 4 years learning. She had the infrastructure. I had the methodology and the relationships. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a partnership agreement. Equity stake. Creative directorship. Full autonomy on client selection and campaign strategy. No ceiling. I didn't negotiate immediately. I read every line. Then I asked 2 questions, got 2 answers I respected, and told her I'd have my attorney review it and respond within the week. I signed on a Wednesday. No hesitation. The week the partnership was announced, I got a connection request on LinkedIn from Lisa. No message attached. Just the request, sitting there like a question mark. I left it pending. 6 weeks into the new role, we were already in conversations with 4 prospective clients. 2 of them had come through the Calloway relationship. Diane had referred them personally. That's what 4 years of actual work looks like when it finally has your name on it. At some point in that stretch of weeks, a former colleague forwarded me a job posting. Senior account strategist, a major regional brand, full client ownership, strong compensation. The description read almost exactly like the role I had been doing for the agency for years. Down to the language. Down to the strategic frameworks. Someone, somewhere, had been paying attention to how I operated. They had reverse engineered a job description from outcomes I had driven and were now trying to hire someone to replicate what I had done quietly for 4 years. I didn't apply. I posted the job on my feed with 1 line. Funny how they build the role description once the person who invented the job walks out the door. It got 14,000 impressions. The comments wrote themselves. Patricia saw it and sent me a voice note. She laughed for about 4 seconds and then said, "This is exactly why I wanted you." I saved that voice note. A few weeks later, I got a call from an unknown number. Voicemail. It was Lisa. She sounded different. Smaller somehow. She said she had heard about what I was building and that she knew things had ended in a complicated way and that she genuinely wished me well. She said she hoped I knew she had always respected my work, that she got caught up in something she should have stepped back from, and that she was sorry. I sat with the voicemail for a few minutes. Then I labeled the folder she lived in, they remember. I didn't call back. But I wasn't angry anymore either. Anger had been replaced by something quieter and more permanent. Forward motion. The agency lost 2 more accounts that quarter. A restructuring was announced. My manager's title changed in a way that meant exactly what those title changes always mean. I saw it on LinkedIn in about 3 seconds and kept scrolling. The day I got the invitation to speak at a regional marketing summit, I was in the middle of a client presentation and saw the email come through on my second screen. Main stage. 45 minutes. Topic of my choice. I accepted and wrote the title in about 30 seconds, Systems That Erase You, and How to Build the Ones That Don't. I stood on that stage in front of 400 people, most of them women, some of them barely out of school, some of them with the particular look in their eyes that comes from having been in too many conference rooms where nothing added up. I told them the story from the beginning, not the polished version. The one with the Tuesday and the printed document and the drive home with a succulent in the passenger seat. The room didn't respond right away. It sat with it for a moment. Then it stood up. After I came off stage, a woman around 22 stopped me in the hallway. She had that look. Clenched jaw, trying to hold something steady behind her eyes. She said she had been documenting things at her current job for 3 months and had started to feel like she was being paranoid. I looked at her. "You're not paranoid," I said. "Paranoid is when the pattern isn't real. You have a pattern. Keep documenting." She exhaled like she had been holding it for weeks. I gave her my card. That night, I sat at the same kitchen table where I had started all of this. Same coffee, same laptop, same external drive sitting next to the keyboard. The succulent was on the windowsill, new growth on 3 sides. Outside, the city made its regular noise. My phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't recognize. Just 4 words. "You won." Was it worth it? I set the phone down and thought about it for a moment. Then I typed back 1 line and put my phone away. It was never about winning. It was about not letting them decide what my work was worth. 3 dots appeared on the other end. Then nothing. The conversation ended. But mine was just getting started. I wasn't the woman who got passed over in a conference room anymore. I was the woman who walked out of it, kept every receipt, built something they couldn't replicate, and ended up owning part of the story they tried to write without her. And on the door of the office, Patricia and I signed the lease for last spring, in clean sans serif letters, is a name they misspelled 3 times and laughed about once. They don't laugh anymore. My name is on the door now. Not on the invite. On the door. And to every woman who has ever sat in a conference room and watched someone slide a paper across the table that doesn't match your 4 years, don't just fight to stay in the room. Build the building. Because I promise you, the receipts you're keeping right now, they're the blueprint.